Hi, this is Gary Chodorow, Managing Attorney at Chodorow Law Offices. This video is for you, our client. The time is approaching for your U.S. visa appointment. It's an important moment for you, we know, and it's important to our firm. This article provides tips about how to get ready. This video covers 1. How to prepare for the appointment, 2. Strategies for the interview, and 3. Listening to the consular officer's decision. This video provides a general overview. Our law firm staff will meet with you individually to provide legal advice about how to apply these tips to the specific facts of your case. Let's dive right in. Let's start by discussing how to prepare for the appointment. Know the requirements for the visa and the key issues in your case. The law places the burden of proof on you. In other words, the officer can only issue the visa if you prove you're eligible. So get to know the basic legal requirements and any key issues about whether you meet those requirements. Our staff will discuss this with you. Armed with this knowledge, you can answer the consular officer's questions in a way that highlights your eligibility for the visa. Next, you need to know the procedures at the consulate. Our staff will advise you about the procedures for your appointment. For example, how to find the consulate, which entrance to use, what are the security procedures, and what will happen during the interview. Carefully review your application materials to be sure you understand them and they're accurate. This includes your Form DS-160 non-immigrant visa application or Form DS-260 immigrant visa application, your resume, any invitation letter, etc. This also includes any underlying petition filed with the USCIS. Let our firm know if any updates or corrections are needed. Make sure you can answer any questions by the officer consistently with those materials. For example, if you're a work visa applicant, make sure your job description that you tell the officer is consistent with what the petitioner told USCIS. Or if this is a spouse or fiancé case, make sure your description of the history of the relationship is consistent with what the petitioner told USCIS. All information submitted to the consulate must be correct to the best of your knowledge. You are responsible for the information you provide, even though our firm assisted you in preparing it. Our staff will provide you with a final list of documents to bring to the appointment. Make sure you have each one. We'll let you know whether you need to bring the original, a copy, or both. Organize your documents so you can quickly find any particular one that you need during the interview. For example, a family-sponsored immigrant visa applicant might divide the documents into plastic folders with labels like financial documents, civil documents, and immigration history. We recommend that you organize your documents in the same order as the documents list we provide you. During the short interview, you don't want to waste time fumbling through your papers. You should be neatly and conservatively dressed at the consulate. You want to make a good first impression because there's no time for a second impression. Here's a tip for business-related visa applicants. Consider wearing neat clothes similar to what you would wear to work, and wear your company ID badge if you have one. During the interview, you mostly just need to listen to and answer the officer's questions. But there may be a few critical things you need to remember. For example, telling the officer some information even if the officer doesn't ask, or offering a document even if the officer doesn't request it. Our firm will help you prepare a short to-do list. Bring it with you to the interview. Next, we'll discuss strategies for the interview with a consular officer. Be ready for the interview conditions. Those conditions are less than ideal. For security reasons, applicants are separated from the officers by a bulletproof window. There is a slot for sliding documents between you and the officer. To be heard through the window, use a speaking voice that is clear, not too soft, and not too fast. Most interviews are very short, just a few minutes. That's because of the high demand for U.S. visas and the limited supply of consular officers. Tell the truth during your interview. If the consular officer suspects you are lying, even if he or she is mistaken, you will be denied. Further, if you're caught in a lie, you could become permanently ineligible for U.S. visas. So don't try to hide a bad fact or awkward fact or otherwise avoid answering a question. There's a saying, the cover-up is worse than the crime. Essentially, this means it's better to be honest about a bad fact than to bury it. Here's what one consular officer feels about asking personal questions to family-sponsored immigrants.
I think it's also important to mention that because the consular officer is obligated to find out about the relationship, and these relationships are personal, right? They're your husband or your wife or your brother or your sister or maybe your child. We're going to ask you questions about that personal relationship, and it can feel strange or awkward to talk about that with someone you've never met through the glass while a bunch of other people are standing behind you. Please be aware the consular officer has no personal interest in getting that information from you. You might think it's awkward to respond. Most of the consular officers think it's awkward to ask you those questions, but we're required to, and that's our job.
Officers don't ask the same questions to every applicant. They tailor their questions to address their specific concerns about each case. Our law firm will review the likely questions in your case with you. Your strategy should be to listen carefully to the questions and then respond truthfully and directly. Officers like interviews to be free-flowing conversations. This is seen by officers as a sign of credibility. In contrast, a memorized speech by an applicant is seen as a sign that the applicant likely is not telling the truth. Use an appropriate level of eye contact. In American culture, eye contact is seen as a sign of directness and honesty. Americans may feel you are not credible if you don't look us in the eye. Consular officers receive cultural training and know that customs differ in other countries. Still, you may make a better impression if you make eye contact without staring. Listen carefully to each question and answer that precise question. No more, no less. Wait till the officer has finished asking you the question. Don't interrupt. Don't give extra information. Keep your answer short. Extra information can be confusing or seem like a waste of time to the officer. In the worst case scenario, extra information could lead the officer to pursue a new line of questions and then deny the visa. Take this example of a visitor's visa applicant who wants to attend a conference in the US. The officer asks, "Are you married?" And she responds, "No, but my parents are considering arranging my marriage to a family friend in New Jersey." The applicant just hurt her chances of proving she has the required non-immigrant intent. The best answer to the question, "Are you married?" would have been a simple no. If you don't understand the question, say, "Sorry, I don't understand. Could you please repeat?" Or, "Could you please rephrase the question?" If you don't know the answer to a question, don't make one up, don't guess. Just say, "Sorry, I don't know." And define or avoid any technical terms because the officer might not understand. The officer may not ask to see all the documents you bring, even the most important ones. Why not? The officer doesn't know what documents you have. The officer may be in a hurry, and he or she may be able to decide your case based on other information. Our firm may suggest that for a few key documents, when you walk up to the counter to start the interview, you lay them out on the counter. This is so you remember to show them to the officer. At an appropriate time, offer them. For example, the officer asks, "What's the purpose of your trip to the US?" And you reply, "To visit my brother, Daniel, in Los Angeles for Christmas. He's a US citizen. Here's his invitation letter." Here's another example. The officer asks, "Have you ever been arrested?" And you say, "Yes, but the charges were dismissed. Here's the court judgment." Notice that it's best to first directly answer the officer's question and only then offer the document to the officer. Officers have received training in the local language but may not be fluent. Translators are available if the officer feels that's necessary. In some cases, your English level is relevant, and so the officer may speak with you in English. For example, student visas, employment visas. business visas where the visit's purpose requires English, like attending a conference. Spouse or fiancé visas where the petitioner doesn't speak your local language. In these cases, the officer might speak with you in English to see if you're able to communicate with the petitioner. In other cases, no English is required for the visa, so the officer has no reason to test your English. For example, EB-5 visas, most tourist visas, and most family-sponsored visas. You should expect the officer to be professional and courteous, to be fair and consistent, and to follow standard procedures in the law. Rarely, an officer will appear rude or unfriendly. Perhaps this is his or her way to be professional. In any case, it's in your best interest to treat the officer with courtesy and respect. Never lose your temper. At the end of your interview, the officer should tell you the decision in your case. If unfortunately the officer denies your case, make sure you know the factual basis for the refusal. This may make it easier to later analyze the next steps in your case. For example, if the officer says, "I'm sorry, I'm unable to approve your visa today," you could ask, "Could you please tell me what facts make me ineligible?" Or, if the officer says, "I'm sorry, I'm unable to approve your visa because you lied," you could say, "Could you please tell me, what do you believe I lied about?" Common grounds for refusal are discussed next. The officer may tell you at the end of your interview that the visa can't be approved immediately because more documents are needed. The officer will give you a written notice explaining what's needed. The notice may be entitled a 221G notice. It will explain how to submit the documents, such as by mail or email. Listen to what the officer tells you and read what the officer writes on the refusal notice. Make sure you understand precisely what documents you need to submit to the consulate. Ask the officer any follow-up questions to be sure you understand. The officer may give you notice that administrative processing is necessary. This can mean several different things. Most commonly, the officer wants to request an opinion called a security advisory opinion from the visa office in Washington, D.C. Another reason you may be given an administrative processing notice is that the officer may want to investigate something about your case. If the officer tells you that administrative processing is necessary, he or she should tell you about how long it will take. Ask if the officer doesn't tell you. Don't expect the officer to tell you why administrative processing is necessary, though. If the officer thinks your case will be approved soon, he or she may want to hold on to your passport. But if you need the passport soon to travel abroad or apply for another country's visa, tell the officer you want your passport back. You can return it to the consular post later for the visa to be added. Another basis for refusal is that the applicant is ineligible. With very few exceptions, the officer will provide the applicant with a notice explaining why. Here's a tip for visitors visa applicants. The most common ground for refusal of this visa is that the officer has not been persuaded that the applicant is going to the U.S. for a proper purpose and/or that the applicant intends to return abroad upon completion of that purpose. In some cases, even though USCIS has approved a petition, for example, an H-1 or L-1 temporary worker petition, or a Form I-130 petition for alien relative, still the officer may believe that it was approved by USCIS in error. This is typically because the officer believes that during the interview, he or she has learned key facts that were unknown to USCIS. In this situation, politely ask the officer, what facts are the reason the petition is being returned? You can be confident in your ability to do well during the interview. This is because 1, your visa application and other materials have been prepared carefully in advance. 2, our law firm will do at least one practice interview with you. And 3, if you feel a little bit nervous, that's perfectly okay. A bit of nerves can add enthusiasm and help keep your mind focused. Our firm will prepare for the interview with you in order to maximize your odds of success. Don't hesitate to let us know if you have any question or concern. One more thing. Right after your interview, please call our firm. If your visa has been approved, we want to know the good news. In those few cases where there are problems, we want to know immediately because sometimes quick action can overcome the problem. Thank you for listening.